Hello. So before I start, I just want to say like a random thing that happened this morning. I'm walking down 108th Street and I see this ridiculous truck. Ridiculous truck. I mean, you have never seen anything like it. I can't describe it. It was like, I can describe, I can try. Basically, it was like a box truck. It was about the size of a box truck. But where the box part would be was basically an old man on his hands and knees, like this huge old man on his hands and knees with his face is facing the back, facing the cars behind. Ridiculous.
This is a real man, or
this is the truck figure. Is formed in this shape. So if you want to know what it looks like, adults, if you want to know what it looks like, you can check out rickmobile.com. I think that's what it's called. The Rickmobile.
Mm-hmm.
Rickmobile.com. And that's and that apparently it's a promotion for a television channel or something. So I don't know. I know I'm just participating in the gimmick by talking about it. That's exactly what they want. But I noticed something fascinating: the reactions of people on the street. Okay, so I saw just two sort of classic reactions. One person immediately pulls out their phone and starts taking a picture out of it, right? And another person just stood there and laughed, right? I looked back at the person who took a picture, stone-faced. To me, that was so powerful.
Yes.
That the person who's taking the picture is completely stone-faced. There's no emotional experience there.
The experience is transformed into.
Yeah, the experience is literally at arm's length, right? You're objectifying the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. In this is I took this as a teaching about prayer. In Kabbalistic and Jewish literature and Jewish mysticism, there's this in the intellectual process, the intellectual emotional process, there are three categories in the intellectual experience. There's chokhmah, bina, and da'at. Right, literally, chokhmah. So it classically translated as wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Right. Chokhmah refers to the abstract idea as it is. Right. The point of creation, the emanation of the idea at first. Bina refers to the analysis of the idea. Da'at is the magic sauce, where we decide if the idea is important,
Mm-hmm.
where we begin to care about the idea. It's the bridge between intellect and emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of life we spend in the or so much, especially in our religious life, we have to understand this process of ideas, concepts, and inner transformation. So it occurred to me that when the person is taking a picture of this Rickmobile, stone-faced, they will have a very accurate representation, and they can reflect on it, they can analyze it, but it's at arm's length. I actually I almost forgot the name of the truck so that I could look it up. I wanted to look it up and I almost forgot it.
right?
But I had a good laugh.
You had to laugh?
I had a good laugh when I saw the truck. But if I had taken a picture of it, but I noticed that the people who took a picture of it didn't have that moment in which they allowed themselves to experience the joy and wonderment and surprise. So when we approach prayer, we can pray with our cell phones at arm's length, analyzing the beauty of the literature. I mean, if we're lucky enough, right, we can analyze the beauty of the literature, think about the theological significance of the words. We can ponder what it is to be a Jew, right? We can listen to the art of the cantorial chanting, right? These are things that we do in our prayer life, right? Especially if we're advanced in prayer. And in a way, those who don't have that facility are maybe at an advantage for this reason, because what we really want to be doing is not having a cell phone moment with prayer, a Facebook post moment with prayer, where we encapsulate, articulate some idea. We want to get into it, be. We want. It's true that so a lot of prayer is speaking about how God is great, etc. So it's true that God is great, but we need to have a moment with that and have a good laugh, or have a good cry, or have a moment of real contact with the idea. And so that's my Rickmobile lesson for today. Okay, so again, without any advertising intended, I received no promotional considerations for this message. But if you want to understand what I'm talking about, you can go online to therickmobile.com, and then imagine yourself standing on a street and seeing that vehicle just drive in front of you. It's a moment of wonderment. Okay. Today, we are purportedly studying Parshat Nitzavim, Deuteronomy 29, verse 9. And okay. This Torah reading that we read today is always read on the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. And the sages say that there's actually, it's pretty evident that this is that the themes discussed are very relevant to the meaning of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. Look at this. You are standing this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your heads of your tribes, your elders, your officers, your families, all the Jewish people. In order to enter you into the covenant of the Lord your God and in his oath that he establishes with you this day. So the right, you see the Rosh Hashanah theme right there? All of us standing together in the presence of God to establish a covenant. so that we would be his people and he would be our God. There's a theme from, well, that's already the Yom Kippur service. Ki anu amecha, we are your people. V'ata Elokeinu, and you are our God. Right? And then, interestingly, the verse says, look at verse 14. For those who are here with us this day and those who are not with us this day are all included in this oath, in this covenant. I guess that means us too, right? And then it goes on to do a little recap on the consequences of violating the Torah, the blessings of returning. And here is another Rosh Hashanah moment. Chapter 30, verse 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Let's read Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 1, page 880. And it shall come to pass, when all these things, the blessing and the curse that I have placed before you, when the blessing and curse shall come to pass, and you will return to your heart from all the nations, among all the nations where the Lord your God has driven you away. And you will return to the Lord your God and listen to his voice, as all that I have commanded you this day, you and your children, with all your heart and with all your soul. And the Lord will bring you back, will bring back your captives, and have mercy on you, and will return and gather you from midst all the nations where the God has dispersed you there. If your dispersed be at the ends of the heavens, God will gather you from there and take you from there. And he'll bring you to the land that your ancestors possessed, and you will possess it. And he will do good for you and multiply you more than your ancestors. Check this out. Verse 6. Umol Hashem Elokecho es levavecho ve'es levav zarecho. And the Lord your God will circumcise your heart, will uncover, will make vulnerable and exposed your heart and the heart of your children, so that you would love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul for the sake of your life. And look at the words in the Hebrew on verse 6, starting from the fourth word. Look at the first letter of each word. Es levavecha ve'es levav spells out the word Elul. That's the Hebrew month in which we find ourselves now. You see that? And the Lord your God will make vulnerable your heart and the heart of your children. Elul. So I think it's pretty obvious that this is a Rosh Hashanah Parsha. It's a Rosh Hashanah reading. So the theme that I wanted to focus on today, as I said in the title, is sinners in the family. And how we deal with the imperfect among us. And I hope you'll bear with me as I think out loud. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about this tension between being dispersed, being cast away because you have forsaken God, experiencing failure, the consequences of failure, and taking that to heart, and being real with it, and thus returning to God. And the Torah portion opens up. So I guess let me just take a step outside for a minute and look at popular culture. One thing that concerns me very much nowadays is the cancel culture, where we look at people who have done bad things, and as a society, we band together to lynch them, have them removed from their positions, have them cast out of society, have their evils, their mistakes, their foibles exposed and advertised, and really make sure that our society is clean. So I want to think about that for a minute, this cancel culture. And on the one hand, it's a good thing, because we don't want to have a society that embraces sinners and sins. We don't want to be a culture that gives sanction to evil. Right?
Especially if the evil involves victims.
Especially when that evil involves victims. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Is there another hand?
On the other hand?
On the other hand.
Yes, but we have supposedly a method of doing this in the law that seems to be bypassed in many of these states.
Okay, so when popular culture does this, they are kind of serving as judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah.
That's true. On the other hand, if the law would have been applied justly and consistently, then the people wouldn't be dealing with this. I mean, in theory at least, we wouldn't have criminals in our midst if the law was applied justly and consistently, and if we knew we could trust the system to deal with our criminals, right?
Right now, the system can be bought.
So the system can be bought, or the system protects the rich and powerful.
Yeah.
And it's only with society banding together that we can hope to have strength and unity, and to be able to face up to the immense power of the system, because the people, after all, are a system of their own, aren't they? We just have to know that we are. So what I'm saying is that there is a relationship between the criminal justice system and the people. So you say the law there's a way of taking care of it within the law, but the reality is that the people are the ones that hold the law accountable. That the law won't be applied justly on its own unless the people demand it. And so in a way, the cancel culture is an important ingredient in making sure that the law is applied. Right? The problem is that it's kind of hard to do that without exerting some pretty strong force. And then we end up becoming judge, jury, and executioner. So what to do? I would say that on the other hand, here's the other hand that I would point to. What about a person who? So here's the problem with the law. Okay, the problem with the law is that it doesn't know people's heart, and the law takes something like the statute of limitations. Okay, the statute of limitations says that after a certain number of years go by, After a person has committed a crime, you can't prosecute them for it anymore. Why?
Yeah, what was the rationale behind that?
So there's a number of let's say I'm not a legal scholar, but let's assume, okay, let's suppose what those rationales might be. Can witnesses accurately remember what happened so many years later? Okay.
That depends on the crime. Because if you've been severely hurt, you more than likely can remember a lot of what happened. The witnesses, I think, would have more trouble remembering.
Okay. So we're talking about. So you're saying that the victim themselves never forgets, remembers every
No,
detail.
that's not true, actually, because in a rape situation, a lot of the time the
People
victim
black
does
out.
block it out.
So blocking it out also. I mean that can happen
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
Right. That's not necessarily over many years. And the same also goes for specific details. It's hard to really investigate a crime properly and have all the information so many years later. It's one possibility.
It's also hard to do in the moment.
That's also true.
Especially
Emotions,
with a
yeah.
crime like that.
The emotions can also get in the way. And as you said, witnesses who are maybe vital for properly prosecuting the crime may not remember the details, especially because they weren't personally involved, and the sands of time cover over our memory. Another possibility, and this goes to the theory of why we're prosecuting crimes at all, is that so many years later the person may not be the same person. Maybe.
But looking at it the other way, there are so many people that do end up repeating the same crime.
Okay, so we have to go to the theory of why crimes are prosecuted at all, right? Why prosecute a criminal? So we might say there's a number of possibilities. One possibility is because a person should be punished for something they did. Does that ever go away? No.
No.
Another possibility is that that society needs to be deterred, and a person needs to be deterred from doing crimes. And so the consequences of crimes, the possibility of prosecution, is a deterrent both from the individual person from doing it again, as well as from others who see what happened, right? What do you think about the statute of limitation vis-a-vis deterrence?
Well, as you say, the person might have become a different person. You might have given up that.
Right? There may be nothing to deter at that point, right?
Yeah.
But then again, they might not have, and they might be repeating the same kind of crime and just.
Right.
Okay, so then prosecute them for the more current crime.
But what about
Well, if they're
victim?
continuing the theory of this, good.
Through it throughout their life.
So there's two more rationales, okay? But let's just stay with this for a moment. If we look at the deterrence, right? If the issue is deterrence, then so if you're saying that people likely continued acting on the crime, so then the statute of limitation isn't relevant. The statute of limitation assumes that this person committed a crime many years ago. There's nothing to prosecute in the interim, and therefore the statute of limitations stands, right? If you could show that the person is continuing, then you don't need the statute of limitations because you can show that they continue. The question is, can you tag on an additional count that happened many, many years earlier? Okay, that's a nuance, right? Then we have the idea of retribution. The victim deserves to have their pound of flesh. The victim suffered.
So much of the time with the victim, they have not gotten over it.
Right.
So it affects them for the rest of their
lives. And so retribution says that the person should be punished for what they did, and the victims are waiting for their payback.
Resolution.
Right? I wonder I don't know if this is. I don't know if this works. I don't know if there's any real data on whether what it feels like
Is
to
that
get your
payback
retribution.
or is it closure? Being able to
So that's my question.
close a
Is
section of their life.
does somebody else control your closure?
That could be a factor,
Yes.
but you might be able to close it yourself.
And does the person getting punished, does that will that necessarily make closure possible? Is it possible that the person will be punished and I still won't have closure?
Definitely, but at the same time, we've been seeing when the person has done it to one person, other people come out and say they have done it to them as well, and
And what does that
were
accomplish?
hesitant.
So what does that accomplish?
It makes the person realize they're not alone. This person is wicked.
Did you have any doubt that that person is wicked? You needed confirmation.
In today's society, yes, because so much of the time your reality is denied. Oh, this never happened. It's in your head. You caused it.
I
It's a witch
wonder.
hunt. It's a witch
It's a
hunt.
witch hunt. Yeah, so what I'm saying is I wonder about how much of this work needs to happen inside and how much of this work needs to happen outside. So I don't think that I'm not. I want to make very clear that I'm not, when I'm posing these thoughts, I'm not suggesting that there's an absolute answer, that that any one of them is absolutely right or wrong. I think that it's important to recognize that there is no wholeness in any of them. I mean, the other aspect of deterrence is just putting someone away to stop them from doing it.
To stop
Right.
them from doing it again.
Some people need to be stopped. That's also an important protect society from people who just can't be stopped in any other way, right? And then the last is that the justice system facilitates a person getting rehabilitated, facilitates a person actually changing.
But it doesn't.
So, well, I don't know that that's true. Why you say that it doesn't?
Because with the way the criminal system is set up, you put them in jail, they're around people that are doing the same or similar things. And there's so much violence in the system that they get beat up and get angrier and they get actually worse.
That's true in many cases. So let's take two approaches to this point. One approach is the idealistic, which is to say, if we were creating our own justice system, what would our intentions be in creating that system? And B, what is actually, well, I'm not sure. Going back to, don't victims need closure? Shouldn't that be part of our concept in creating a justice system? Shouldn't that be part of our intention? Shouldn't deterrence be part of our intention in creating a justice system? Yes, right. So I don't think the rehabilitation is the only intention that we should have.
Rehabilitating assumes that they're in jail, they're being punished for what they did. Now let's see if we could change them and make them people that can cope in society.
I know people who have been through the system.
There are some people that can never.
No, I'm gonna say I have met people who have been in the system and who have turned their lives around as a result. And I would say that if they had not got caught, they likely would not have had that moment of inner reckoning in which they had to transform their lives. So it's definitely true that these moments of reckoning do spark that moment of that process of interchange.
And for the ones I think that can change, I think they should be accepted into
Oh,
society.
so the ones that can change should be accepted into society. So how do we determine that? Good. One other point is that so now that we're looking at this issue of how we deal with sin, let's, rather than looking at how we as a society deal with sin, let's bring it a little closer to home. How do we deal with sin and failure in our own family, right? With people that we are close to, and certainly on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we are standing as a community addressing our sins. Supposedly, we're addressing our own sins, but the question is, how do we think about the person next to us who's a sinner on Rosh Hashanah?
I saw a little bit of the program, Ken Burns and country music, and one maybe it was Merle Haggard, a country singer, was talking about. It may have been him talking about the many times he was caught doing bad things and put in jail. Was it him who escaped many times from various confinements and wanted to escape again? And a person came up to him and said, "I have a plan. We had to escape, and you want to join in?" And he said, "Yes." But at that point, he had started writing songs, and the guy who developed the plan to escape said to him, "Don't join us. Stay here and turn your life around, because you have something that you can rely on. I don't, you know." So so he decided to do that. His life did, according to him, his life did turn around at that point. He became a model prisoner and got out eventually and became had a livelihood, a panosa to turn
Right.
to songwriting.
So what I'd like to suggest is that if we are all embracing, then we are doing the sinners among us a disservice. And if we are unforgiving, if we are entirely prosecutorial and judgmental, then we are just annihilating them. Meaning, it's one way to remove sin by just killing sinners. Just kill them.
And we do this sometimes.
And we do.
Yeah.
We do that literally.
Mm-hmm.
But we also do that societally by excommunicating people, writing them off, canceling them.
Mm-hmm.
We virtually lynch them. We lynch them virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And what's wrong with that? Well, we protect ourselves, but that's easy to do when that person doesn't belong to us. But when that person is our own child, our own sibling, spouse, parent, relative, community member, someone who we're close with, then we can't cancel them, because if we cancel them, we're canceling a part of ourselves. Forget canceling part of ourselves. This person has value. They aren't all their sin. This is the trouble of the and again, the danger of saying what I'm saying is that, on the other hand, what you have is when a person does something terrible, you say, let's overlook it because this person is a father. They're a member of the community. They do so much good. Let's not make waves, right? Which is also not good. So this is the conflict that we have.
So we often speak of God's properties of compassion and justice, or the opposite things that have to be balanced or that are called upon in prayer at different times.
Yeah.
Doesn't it go a lot by, if you could figure out, I guess, if the person is totally evil or if the person can be rehabilitated?
Okay.
But then how could anybody be totally evil?
Right. So first of all, let's say like this. I'm a little scattered right now. Let's say like this. Is a person totally evil? No one's totally evil,
Yeah.
right? Even even the worst of the worst, they warm up the room a little bit, like there's meaning they produce some body heat. Even if only that, they produce body heat, that's a thing. Right? There's always some
Saving grace.
I want to say saving grace. I don't want to say saving grace in this, not only because of its Christian associations, but I don't want to say saving grace because you don't have to say that their positive qualities save them from their real negativity. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are good qualities to people, right? Even though their evil qualities may be completely evil, right? And the two don't necessarily cancel each other out. And I don't think we should think about them as canceling each other out. Meaning, because again, it's kind of like the candy and the child molesters that I spoke about before, offline. It's like the saving grace, calling it a saving grace, encourages us to tolerate something that's truly evil. It's like everything that's negative, in order to survive, needs to be producing some positive in order to allow it to exist, right? A baby is the most annoying thing on earth, right? So how does it live? It's cute. For as long as the more dependent a baby is, the more cute it is, and the less dependent it becomes, the cuteness fades away. It's a biological phenomenon, right? Things, people talk about how bad drugs are. Nobody talks about how fun they are. Stupid. No one would do it if it wasn't fun.
And if it didn't serve a purpose,
It serves
getting them away from what is going on.
Whatever, right? It's
destroying them inwardly.
Right. It's drugs are powerful stuff. It's real. Like, let's not kid ourselves. The stuff works. Right?
And the drug taker knows the dangers.
The drug taker knows the dangers, right?
Stupid.
They're not stupid. Exactly. They know exactly what they're doing, but there's got to be, so calling it saving grace is what allows a person to use drugs. It's like the saving grace of this poison is that it gets me incredibly high.
Yeah.
Right? So that's my problem with saving grace.
But then why do you need to get high?
Okay, I'm using it as I don't want to get down the rabbit hole of the psychedelic wonderland. I just I want to it's just saying as a concept, right? Yeah. Like the same way as the child abuser who gives out free candy, right?
There is candy involved.
Right, there is candy involved, right? There is actually, the candy is actually there, right? It doesn't make the abuse any less, but he gave out candy. He was such a nice guy, right? It doesn't make the abuse any less of a thing, right? So when we equivocate, we're again allowing the evil to remain, and that's also not good. Right. So and it's bad for us and it's bad for the person, because they will not deal, that evil will remain for them and it will remain for me. So, and particularly when we're dealing with somebody that we're close with, that's we and again, when I'm not talking about necessarily the person that's abusing me. Right? It's a bit of a different conversation. I'm talking with how I view my family member who abused someone else, or who did something else that's wrong, or that does something wrong, right? And of course, just as a side, I mean, of course, I'm perfect. So no one has to tolerate me ever.
If a person is caught my nephew got addicted to drugs and to alcohol. My brother-in-law and my sister, number one, they found out part of the reason was he couldn't deal with school because he's learning disabled.
Okay.
Number two, once they got him the help, he's turned around.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank God he was only with marijuana. He didn't go to anything heavier than marijuana.
Okay.
And alcohol.
So let's talk about how that worked. So your nephew got stuck in drugs, and they found that it wasn't the drugs, it was a learning disability. And when they addressed the underlying cause, he was able to get out of it. Right?
And he's still in therapy and stuff because of it.
Right. Okay, but what are the let's talk about, if we were a criminal justice system, if we were approaching this relative as a criminal justice system, right? What was the process that we approached this as a family that had this positive result? And what are some other ways that people are treating relatives and their failures that don't end up with that positive result, right? So one is the war on drugs, right? He's using drugs, out of my house, right? Out of the house. Come back when you're clean.
And that's never gonna work.
Which sounds really kind, because I'm leaving the door open.
Tough love.
Right? Tough love, right? Or, oh, Bubala, I love you unconditionally.
I don't think she went to that extreme either.
Right. It's clearly not, because that wouldn't have had the good result either.
Yeah.
Right. So instead, we have a non-anxious, unblinking focus on the negativity as a family. So we're really taking it head on. We're not ignoring it. We're not sweeping it under the rug, but we're also not condemning the person. So there's a balance, right? Between on the one hand, really seeing the evil for what it is. At the same time, not allowing that evil to become the narrative. The evil isn't the narrative is that this is a relative, that this is a person who's special to us, who's important to us, in whom we have incredible hope, and with whom we have undying and unwavering commitment. At the same time, we are in no way denying the reality that this person has a real bad problem.
Yeah. And
the problem is really bad. And they have really hurt people. And they are hurting themselves.
Nobody can hurt anybody other than himself.
Oh, no? You know how many people died? You know how many people died to get him his weed?
Oh.
The beheadings in Mexico? How many missing people are out there? This weed traveled over the backs of corpses.
Thank you. I never thought of
Or you should make it legal. That part doesn't happen.
that.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
don't know that it
So-
should be legal because it is addictive.
Well, okay. So is coffee.
Liquor.
Liquor. You wonder if liquor.
So is
should be
liquor, right?
legal too?
That didn't work very well. Prohibition, did it?
No, it didn't seem to work right then.
Prohibition doesn't.
The stern response.
Right. So, but legalizing it. So now it's true that legalizing it will do away with many of the cartels. At least the cartels won't be able to make money on illegal drugs anymore. They'll find other ways of making money, right? But yes, there are other ways that drugs hurt. Being an addict is emotionally detached,
Yeah.
and that can destroy relationships and families.
Oh yeah.
Meaning even legal alcohol destroys families, destroys relationships, ruins many things, right? So,
And it kills if you're driving.
and it kills if you're driving, absolutely. So I think that that you know, so I guess the point is that, you know, I don't want to get into a long conversation about harmless sins and harmful sins and victimless crimes. Let's just talk about, you know, certainly from the religious point of view, from a religious point of view, even a victimless crime is the responsibility of the community. It's something that we shouldn't ignore, both because we have an obligation to our loved one. So, for example, if we see our loved one engaging in only self-destructive behavior, then would we ignore that and love them unconditionally, right? Like, again, we could just choose to ignore it and say it's his life. That's a cruel thing to do.
We could choose
When we see a person doing self-destructive behavior, we're going to choose to ignore it. It's his business. It's his life. Right. And society does that too.
Yeah.
Right. This is the if you encapsulate the cycle that our society is engaging in right now, we say it's your life, it's your business. But when you do something that I don't like, that affects me, I will cancel you. I'll wipe you off the face of the earth.
So
You mess with one of my sisters.
Problems were dealt with when they were quote
I'm-
unquote
I'm not looking at the problem itself, because they're clearly two different crimes. I'm saying that as a society, our approach, our orientation toward flaws in others is problematic,
It's only if it-
because it's completely disregarding of the humanity of the sinner. In that, when the person is sinning, if it's their own life, I don't care. Let them drop dead. And if they hurt me, I don't care what the consequences to them are. Let them drop dead.
Mhm.
The common denominator in society's approach to the sins of others is that sinners should drop dead. Because I don't care. It's my life. My life was what matters. And we end up. So what's wrong with that? Do I have to flush out what's wrong with that? I think, right? It's wrong with, right? It's wrong.
Immoral.
Huh?
It's immoral. It's like
This is the Torah's first reading. The first verse in the Torah reading here is, "You are standing this day, all of you, before the Lord your God."
Yeah, that's it.
Rosh Hashanah requires all Jews standing together.
the good, the bad, and the
Ugly.
Yeah.
they include the
It also
The
included the
stranger.
stranger.
That's right.
which is interesting.
Who does the stranger signify?
It signifies the non-Israelites who came out of Egypt with them.
They came out of Egypt with them.
Yeah. I mean, historically, that's the historical context. There is that, right? They were non-Jews who had.
I thought it was the Mexicans who would do their lawns. Their kids.
Yeah, and by the way, that's an excellent point. The invisible, it's kind of the invisibilizing of the other. We have this obsession with ourselves, and we invisibilize others. So we invisibilize. We just.
Now, what is the message to the stranger? I don't know.
The message to the stranger. The message to the stranger is. The message to the stranger is that they're a part of the covenant, and they have been through thick and thin. They have been dispersed. It's prescient in a way. They've been dispersed. They've faced God's wrath, and now if they come back, God will bring them back all the way. If they return, chapter 30, verse 2, if all of this blessing, the curse, the oath that's referred to in 29:9, in 29:11 rather, is God calling us to return to Him, and that applies to everyone. No one should be invisible. And in the end, God. So I want to say that there's something deeply problematic about Christian theology for this reason, which is and this. I mean, I don't know how they reconcile. I don't know how Christian theologians reconcile, the idea of the new covenant with this verse here that says that God is waiting for you and will bring you back, right? The idea that Israel have turned away from God, and God abolished His covenant with them, and now the Israelites are no longer eligible for a covenant with God, and they have to, and it's now a new covenant, right? So perhaps they would say that you can still become a Christian, and then you'll have a covenant with God. That's then what's wrong with being a Jew and coming back to God? Like, it's like, is there something unredeemable about Jewish culture and Jewish life? Is it irredeemable about that? So, but it has an element of cancel culture in it, which is to say, no, those people are just they're damned.
And anybody that's not like them.
If you're not in, you're out.
Then it goes back to what you were saying, the whole thing with idols and how Christ is really an idol, isn't it? Because he's a person, not a God.
I mean, I think that's that is certainly the Jewish view. I think it's yeah. There's what they say, what they think they're saying, and what they're actually saying, and what they might be saying is I don't know. I'm saying that this culture of writing off sinners is problematic, and the culture of giving grace to sinners is also problematic. And so we have to so what I'm proposing is that we have both. We have to maintain an unconditional bond with our fellow people and a sense of enduring responsibility with our fellow people. And at the same time, never compromise on by ignoring the real evil that exists within them and that they're doing. And that requires constant a balance. It requires an incredible amount of love.
Yeah.
Right? It requires brave and bold and fearless love. At the same time, it requires brave and bold and fearless criticism, as long as it's constructive. So the mother who sees her child, for example, getting into drugs, has to, and I'm bringing this example because you mentioned it earlier, can't become scared by that, and it can't allow them to falter in their love, but at the same time, they can't ignore the actual problem. We have to hold out hope also, right? The love is the hope. So going back to the candy, right?
Mhm.
In a way, in a positive sense, there's the possibility of where the high cancels out, makes us ignore the negativity of the drug, right? Whereas here we're saying that the love, the unconditional love, creates the space where we can continue to work with the person without canceling them, without obliterating them. It holds out the hope that when you get better, when you get better, I'll still be here for you. You know, I'm waiting here. I love you now, and I'm helping you get better, and I'm with you to get better.
And we'll go back to the original relationship we always had once you do get better.
Yeah, I would say maybe even more than the regular.
So, because you've been through so much
We couldn't
together.
have a full relationship. First of all, our relationship is enriched and deeper because we've endured, we've survived, we worked together. You know, so what are you supposed to do? So what are you supposed to do about a child molester in the community? What are you supposed to do about somebody who was a rapist? What are you supposed to do about somebody who was a murderer? What are you supposed to do with real bad people? What about really bad people who did victimhood crimes?
And what about these people that have the mass shootings?
Yeah, what about mass shootings people? Yeah. Right?
So if they weren't able to get a hold of the guns, they couldn't do it.
What do you think a mass shooter, again, we can protect our children. We can protect our children one by one by taking away every gun, but the mass shooter will still be sick in the head. And if we can tolerate your life drop dead, as long as you're not shooting my kids, you can drop dead, right? What would the mass shooter do if he didn't have a gun? He wouldn't kill people, but he would drop dead in some way still. He'd find another way to drop dead. Right. Right. So I'm not minimizing the terrible, terrible tragedy of the mass shooter. But I think we have to be bold and brave for a minute and just say, okay, that's terrible. There's also this person.
That's right.
That we need. So even if we could completely take away the possibility of that person doing any crime to anyone. It wouldn't absolve us of our responsibility to that fellow person. We can't ignore them. And the fact is, right, they need help, and the truth is they'll do damage other ways. It's like it's a little short-sighted.
Matter of priority there.
Absolutely.
Once we got rid of the guns and his inability to kill people, I would put the problem of his own development down on a list of things.
Absolutely.
Real far down.
Absolutely. This is not a practical conversation. This is a soul-searching conversation to ask, what is in our spirit, right? Not what do we have to do right now, right? What is in our spirit vis-a-vis sinful people in our lives, right? So obviously, I'm not suggesting that we create space in which people can continue to do bad things, because that's just wrong. It's wrong because we are allowing evil to continue to live.
Okay, but doesn't then that include the person's family and community as well? Seeing there is something wrong with the person, catching it before it becomes severe?
Right. So what I'm saying is that if we have an unwavering and bold and courageous attitude towards evil, we are more likely to be able to see it when it's a small problem and address it. What I'm saying is it's the same. We get caught up in the Nazi phenomenon. By the Nazi phenomenon, I mean, but what about the Holocaust? And that shuts down the conversation, right? When a problem gets to its extreme, you can't talk about it anymore. The reality is that the same dynamics that exist in the extreme also exist in the less extreme. And it's just a more extreme manifestation of the same problem, right? So it's like if you can talk about the problem.
Is that a problem with the family and religion breaking down in our society?
Yeah, so I think it's a problem with the family. I think the breakdown of the family is, again, the breakdown of the family is a problem, and I think it's a good symbol of this issue, because when you have a family, you know that you have to live with flawed people.
But
right now, it's true. That's right, and you know when they're sick, but it starts with how you deal with the flaws of your loved ones. So I'm saying is that of course it gets to an intolerable and extreme and totally unmanageable. There are totally unmanageable manifestations of this phenomenon, but this phenomenon also exists in a subtle start. In the start, it deals with a subtle thing when your kid is fresh to you.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you deal with your kid being fresh to you? It's the same. I mean, I'm sure there are some people who won't be able to get their head around what I'm saying. That, like, how can you say that? But it's the same. It's the same phenomenon, right?
It's the beginning of
It's the beginning of a problem. Like, let that go, and then you'll have a Nazi. Right. Right. So. And then you won't be able to talk about it anymore because they've done something so terrible that our only priority now is to protect ourselves, right? And it's on the bottom of the list, right? But nonetheless, I think that I'm anyhow. So what I'm saying is that when we so back to dealing with the real victim, with the people who have done crimes or doing crimes that are really involving victims. So of course, awareness is key, and putting safeguards in place to make sure the person doesn't offend is absolutely critical. But does putting safeguards in place mean that the person is evil completely? No, on the contrary. Putting safeguards in place to protect the person from doing sin is allowing their good to exist. I'll give you another example of this, okay, Professor?
Uh-huh.
In male-female relationships, okay? In Jewish culture, we have safeguards that exist between men and women. Right? Ways in which men and women are not allowed to be familiar with each other, so that to sort of protect immorality from happening, right? We have laws about modesty, for example, right? So modern culture doesn't want to have any safeguards like that, because they say you're denying my humanity if you're going to put limitations and safeguards and rules. On the contrary, I'm not denying your reality. We're being very clear-eyed about the potential for immorality in our society, and we're being very loving to our fellow human beings, and we're saying, I love you and I want to be appropriately close with you. And therefore, we're going to be very honest and very open about the potential for immorality that exists in society. We're going to be clear about it. We're going to have these boundaries. And that is the deepest sign of respect for you as a human being, because I'm not going to cancel you. I'm not going to write you off. I want to be able to maintain a healthy relationship with you. And therefore, we need to have safeguards. So,
Okay.
right? So, for example, now let's take that to a child molester, okay? Somebody who has a problem, who's been a child molester, obviously needs to acknowledge that they have a problem, right? We need to be clear-eyed about the real danger and the real evil of this thing. But then we can create safeguards like, don't allow this person to be a school teacher. Don't allow them to be alone in a room with children, right? Let's keep our eyes open. Let's create open spaces where we can be together with people who have real evil problems and recognize that that's not the totality of their person. When we need to cancel people when we don't have safety plans that we can rely on and that are not going to be. Now, I don't know enough about this. I acknowledge that I don't know enough about this, and we haven't tested safety plans. Right? We haven't seen if they are foolproof. But certainly as a society, right, sweeping it under the rug cancels them. It allows them to continue doing evil and requires that eventually we're just going to have to kill them, because that's our only other option, right? So our only hope, our only chance is to look them square in the eye and say, we have a problem. What are we going to do about it? And I think that's a theme in Yom Kippur service. The first words of the Yom Kippur service, first words of the Kol Nidre service. With the consent of God and the consent of the congregation, we permit sinners to pray together with us.
But that's permitting all of us to pray, because I'm sure we've
Absolutely.
in some way or another.
Absolutely. And that's what Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is about in the end. And that's why I said sarcastically earlier, I'm perfect. No one ever has to tolerate me. But that also involves the way we look at our own sin, of course, because we have to be able to look our own selves in the eye and not love ourselves unconditionally and say, yeah, you're a good guy. Don't worry about it. God understands. Right? That doesn't help me. On the other hand, we can't wipe ourselves out and say, you're a bad person, you're evil, you're wrong, you might as well jump.
Love ourselves unconditionally with the knowledge that we
have real problems that we have to work on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Real issues that need to be helped and worked on.
Yes.
But still love ourselves unconditionally.
Right. So, so that's what I have to say. I feel like what I've said today is maybe a little bit controversial, a little bit, and I'd love to continue the conversation. And I'm saying this also for the benefit of my online viewers, I'd love to have these ideas tested so we can talk them through and really see if they work.
Well, we know what we're doing now in society is not working, so
Yeah.
maybe we need to look for something else. Not maybe. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
That was heavy.